Hi, everybody. So welcome to ITD2. This is the live session for week number 3. So week number 3 is going to be all about methods and then using methods in a variety of different ways and then using them to make a menu system so we can easily choose different basically problems inside of a bigger project that we can do. So then we don't have to do every single one every single time. And then we're going to talk more about strings as objects. So methods are going to be great because a method is basically where you write a piece of code off to the side of your main code. And then anytime you need that code, you just say, hey, I already wrote that. It's over here. And you point them to it. And then that code runs and then it comes back to your main code. So it's kind of nice because then you can have reusable code, right? So that's kind of the important thing about that. Now, when we start doing menus, what we're going to do is we're going to make a method for each one of the different menu choices. And we're going to use a loop to continue that method or menus to always continuously start running. So we can actually choose them based on that. And then when we start talking about string as objects, now this one's going to be a little bit more complex because we're going to take a simple string variable and start looking inside of it and seeing exactly what makes up this string variable. And so string variables, or string objects, we call them, right, are going to have their own methods and properties. Now, a method is what we're basically creating up here. The cool thing is string objects, when C# was made, they made a whole bunch of methods or things that it can do built into every single string variable. So that's what we're going to be talking about in code exercise 09. All right. So let's go ahead and jump on in to some live coding. So we're going to start a new project. And for those of you joining us on YouTube later, we did have a quick question that we want to focus on menus, nope, not menus, methods, and how to use for and for each loops with the methods. So we're going to try to incorporate that a little bit more than normal in this session as well, okay? So we're going to say ITD2, live session, and we're going to put week 3. Let's give it a second. Wow, it actually started on the right page for once, because normally it always goes to my secondary monitor. All right, my favorite part, deleting this hello world. Yay, it makes me feel good. All right, so let's go ahead and jump on in. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna just build a super simple method. All right, so when we build a method, it's very important that we go outside of our main. And what is a main? It is a method, right? So we start kind of learning about more what this actually is. Now, the cool thing about the main is this is the method that is automatically called every time we start our C# program. So it says, all right, you're inside the namespace, you're inside of my class, and I'm looking for the specific method called main, and this is where our code automatically runs. Okay. Now from here, we can call other methods that we're going to create ourselves. However, it's super important that we create these methods outside of our original main method because you cannot put a method inside of a method. Okay. You can put a function call inside of a method or a function, right? So then you can actually call upon other stuff from it, but you can't put it inside of itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the closing curly brace of our main method, which is going to be right there. And I'm going to put some spaces in. Now notice we're still going to be inside of our class of program. So if I highlight it down here, notice that it highlights up here. So this is the correct spot to build our first custom method. Okay. Now methods and functions are going to be used kind of the same in this class. Really the only difference is when we start dealing with objects, then that's where we start calling them methods. But for all intents and purposes, functions are methods and methods are functions for the most part. Okay. So let's go ahead and create a basic one. Now the basics of this is the very first thing we have to put is the visibility of this method. Now what that means is who can see it. All right. In this class, we're mainly just going to deal with a public access modifier, but there are a couple different ones. In future classes, you're going to talk about private ones, and the main difference is public can be seen by anyone in any programs, and privates can only be seen by the stuff in the same class. So that's going to be the important thing about that. And there is a couple more, which I'm not going to confuse you with, but you'll learn those in future classes too. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this with a keyword of public. then we're going to put a space, and then we have to put another keyword of static. Now, this is only going to be done when we're typing inside of our main program.cs file. In future classes, you're not going to need this static keyword. It basically allows us to create the method without ever calling it, which is super confusing when you're learning. So just for now, just remember all you have to put is the static keyword after it. Okay, so public and static. Now, after that, we're going to need, oops, let's see. Okay, so Alex wants to know if a private method is kind of like an admin account on a network or on a computer or something like that. Yeah, basically it's kind of who sees it. So the example I always like to use between public over here and private is your house. Okay, think about if you're sitting in your living room and you have a big window out there and you can see the sidewalk outside. Okay, everybody with me? Now, if you do something in your living room, right? Say I'm going to do a funky chicken dance and I'm dancing in my living room. If it's in public, right? That means I'm going to have the window open and everybody on the sidewalk in public can see into my house and look at me doing my weird chicken dance. Okay? Now, if I make this private, right? Whoops, if I could spell private first, then what that means is the window is going to be closed. So I'm going to be in my house doing my little dance, right? And nobody can see it. However, my sister could walk into the room because she is in my same house, so she can see me doing my little dance, okay? Because we're in the same house. Does that make sense? So the public people outside couldn't see me do the dance, but anybody in my house could see it. Does that make more sense? Okay, so we do have another quick question for it. TJ wants to know, are we going to use Visual Studio for future classes or go back to Xamarin? It depends on the class because you're going to be using a lot of different stuff, right? The first couple classes, you start with Xamarin workbooks just because it's super great way to kind of dip your toe into coding and still take notes. And I highly suggest that you use those Xamarin workbooks to continue taking notes. For the next couple classes, you will be using your Visual Studio, right? After that, you're going to kind of branch off and it depends upon what you're going to be doing, right? So if you're in the mobile department, you might have to do some code specific for Xcode if you're going to do like an iPhone app, or you might have to jump into different stuff. So it depends upon your next paths. But the cool thing is this Visual Studio is just really a development environment. So really, we could make C# programs in a lot of different software, right? We're just using Visual Studio because it's the Microsoft one, and Microsoft made C#, so it's kind of a nice way to kind of smush it all together. Cool? Yeah. But if you use Xamarin by itself, not Xamarin workbooks, but Xamarin, they are actually really in the cutting edge of making multi-platform apps. So what you could do is you could write it in one language and it will automatically translate into different languages for the different phones that you have. So if you really want to kind of jump into it, look at Xamarin by itself and then you can see kind of what it switches between. So it's kind of neat. Okay, let's get back on track over here. Yeah, exactly. Right. So Alex said it's kind of like how Notepad++ for Windows can code in a bunch of different programming languages, because really all these files are text, right? So even if I try to open this file up, let me just do that real quick. So if I go and I navigate specifically to this one, and let me see, this is week number 3, really all these files is text files, right? So I could actually open them even with something, whoops, let me try that one more time, like a text editor. And then it is the same thing that I'm actually doing inside of here. The only thing that's going to be different is that Visual Studio is made for this. So it helps us by making the tips and tricks, and notice how it actually automatically puts the line numbers in there and color codes the different things. But really all it is text, right? So all coding uses text. So it's kind of the weird thing about it. Okay, cool. Good question, by the way. Thank you. All right, so we have our public, we have our static. These are the access modifiers. What comes next? Well, the next thing that we're going to need when we're creating a new function is going to be the return value. Now, the return value, what that is it's going to be what data type is going to be returned from this function. Now, this data type can be any data type that we've talked about so far. So it could be a string, it could be a double, a decimal, a list of strings, an array of integers, anything, right? So for this kind of basic example, I wanted to return nothing, okay? Now, nothing so far, we've always used null, but null is not going to be a returnable thing, okay? So null is kind of an empty box, but it's still a box, right? So when we want to return absolutely nothing, we're going to use a new keyword, and that's going to be void, right? Think like the void of space, kind of like there is nothing out there, or into the void, exactly, right? So it's going to be the lack of anything. So that is going to be our return value for the super simple one. Now what we need is we need to name this. Now it's super important that we name our functions starting with a capital letter. So this is called upper camel case. Does anybody in the live class know the fancy programming name for upper camel case? I mentioned a couple of the videos. And if you're a Disney fan, think of Tangled. That's always my hint for that one. Anybody got it? What is the fancy programming term for upper camel case? Yeah, nicely done, Alex. Alex got it with Pascal, so we call it Pascal case. So all that means is start with a capital letter and then capitalize the first letter in each additional word. So for this one, I just want this to do something simple. So do something. Ah, see, Alex said the tangle clue helped. See, that's why I did it. I don't give you the answers. I'll give you clues along the way to get the answers. So I like it. So this is going to be the name of our function. Now, in order to do that, we need to put an open and closing parentheses. And notice when we do, we turn this yellow because that is now saying, hey, this is a function that we're going to be using. Then we need a open and closing curly brace. And everything inside of these curly braces is going to be part of this function. So when I run the function, anything inside of here, whether it's one line or 150 lines, will run one time. Okay? So for this one, because I want it to be super simple, I'm just going to do a console write line with a text string. I'm going to put a \r \n, and then put this can be any code. So it doesn't always have to be a write line. It could be anything. We could be prompting the user. We could be creating things. We could be validating. You can actually create a validation function, right? So instead of writing out a validation every single time, you can make it once and then copy and paste it in your code. When you get to further classes, you're actually going to be doing that as a project. So now we have created our function. Now, after we have that, what happens next, right? So I'm going to say at the very top of this console write line, and I'm going to say \r \n start of my file. Actually, let's put main method, because remember the main method is what automatically starts. Now, if I run this right now, what do you guys think is going to be printed out on the screen? What do you think? Am I going to have one thing on the screen or two? Just answer me that. Am I going to have one thing on the screen or two things on the screen? GJ says two. Alex, what do you think? Alex says just the right line on the main. Let's see what we get. So after we write it, let's see who's right. And there we go. We just have the start of the main method. Now, why does this show, but why doesn't this show, right? And the answer is we wrote this code off to the side. However, in our main method, we never told the computer to go down here and run it, right? Now, what that's called, it's called a function call, right? You could almost think of it as like the go button for our function. So let's put that in our notes. So in order to run our function, we need a function call. All right, and basically what this is, it's going to be the name of our function, an open and closing parentheses, and a semicolon, right? So let's go ahead and run it. Do something, open closing parentheses, and a semicolon. Now notice this is going to be blank inside of here because this is blank inside of here. And we'll get to that in a couple minutes. But now what this does is every single time I put this, which is the function call that matches this function, it's going to run this code one time, okay? So if I hit it now, I not only get the right line up here, so the start of my main, then what happens is it comes down here and says, ooh, I need to go find some other code, right? So then I jump down here and it says run this one time. So it says right line, this can be any code. After it gets done, or the closing curly brace, it comes back up to line number 14, and then it goes down and finishes the file. So that's how that works, okay? So that's, any question on that one? You guys are texting a lot, but it seems like you've answered your own questions, so it's good. All right, so how about this? What if I put this again? Do something, open, closing, semicolon. So now what does that do, right? So this time I should have the right line at the start of it. Whoops, or I'm gonna push it where you can't see it. Let me put that out of the way for a second, and then I'm gonna drag it back on top. Nope. All right, hold on one second. There we go. I need to be able to see both. All right, so we have our start of our main, which is going to be line number 10 right here, right? We come down, remember sequential ordering. So then we go down to line number 14. Line number 14 says, hey, go run the code and do something. So it says, jumps from here down to here, and it says, let's do this. Boop. So this can be any code, runs that. Is there anything else? Nope. So it runs back to line number 14 and says, I'm done. And then it says next line, 15. It says, hey, there's something, do something again. So it comes down here again. And it says, oop, this can be any code, prints it out. Anything else? Nope, I'm done. Finishes line number 15, and then we end our main file. So then our program ends, okay? Now these, every time you put a function, it's like pressing the button once to have it run. Like, so picture like a big factory where things are coming off of a conveyor belt. And every time I push the button, one thing comes off that conveyor belt. So then I press that button twice, so I get two things, all right? So let's add this to a loop. So I'm gonna comment these out, which just means I'm gonna put a slash slash in front of them, so they will not run. And how about if we use a loop to output something 5 times? All right, so if I want to run this function 5 times, what kind of loop should I use? What do you guys think? Yeah, good. TJ got it right off the bat. It's a for loop. So for loop, open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and break those curly braces apart. And the reason, by the way, we used a for loop, for those watching at home, is because we know how many times we want it to run. 5 times. So then we use a for loop, okay? So let's set it, start it. So int I equal to 0, semicolon, I is going to be less than 5, semicolon, and I plus plus. Now remember, the loop is just going to be making it run 5 times. That's all this is doing. That's all the I is for, okay? Now inside of here, I'm going to have our function call. So do something, open closing parentheses, and a semicolon. All right, so now, let's see what we're doing. Okay, so again, sequential ordering. It starts at the top of the main, and it says, hey, I'm gonna write out start of my main. That's up here, right? We come down here, all of that is commented out, so it does not run. Then it says for loop, int I equal to 0, I is less than 5. So 0 is 0 less than 5, that's a true, right? So it runs this one time, boom. So what's inside of it? The function call. So what it does here is it jumps down here, and then it runs that one time. So that gives us this one. We come to the closing curly brace of our for loop. We add 1 to I, which is 1, so we get 1 is less than 5, and then it calls it again. Runs that code, right? Then I plus plus, here's for 2, here's for 3, and here's for 4. Once it turns to 5, then 5 is not less than 5, so then it will stop. Yeah, so TJ asked if it was kind of a shortcut. Yeah, sort of a shortcut, right? So if you have to do something multiple times, you can always create a loop for it, right? A couple of people in the last homework set assignments took their time and actually prompted the user for 3 different recipes, I think it was, and then 3 different page numbers, right? But if you're doing something more than once, you should always use a loop, okay? So that's why you should always start using loops, so you can kind of limit for what you have to do. Make sense? All right. So let's make something a little bit more complicated. So let's use an array with a method. So first off, we need to create a string array. All right, so we need something string arrays. What do you guys think? Do you want to do like favorite foods, or do you want to do board games, favorite colors, ice cream flavors? What do you guys want it to be? I need something that can have a little bit of them, and they're strings. Alex first, he said video games. All right, so we're gonna have string array, so string square brackets, and then a space. Let's put video games, and we're gonna say equal to a new string array, square brackets, and then of course we're gonna put the open closing curly braces and then a semicolon. Now the open closing curly braces allows us to put in starting values for that array. So notice I do not need a length inside of this square brackets if I'm using the curly braces. The other way of doing it is to leave these off and just put in a length here, and you can individually set them as well. All right, so I need some video games from you guys. What do you guys think? I need some names of video games. So the one I've been playing is Divinity 2. It's kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons type thing, so that's kind of fun. Alex says Space Engineers. It's kind of fun. I like it. Let's have two more. Valorant. I don't know that one. Sounds like a shooter game. And then let's actually go ahead and have one more. The new one, Fall Guys. Everybody likes that. It's like the video game version of Wipeout, if you haven't played it yet. All right, so I'm also gonna do a little bit of weirdness inside of here. So I'm gonna add some spaces to the front of these and maybe some spaces to the end of this one. And we're gonna do this because we're gonna start altering these different array elements as well, okay? So let's go ahead and before we do anything else, let's figure out a method that's gonna take these. So let's create a method that will take in an array element and output it to the console. So something like fairly easy again, okay? Let's go down here. Now this is the close of our main. One quick way to remember this and an easy way to do it is to label it, right? So I'm gonna come down here and hover over it. Notice how it's static, void, and main. And by the way, mine's kind of cut off because I have a increased font size, so you guys can easily see it at home, but yours shouldn't be cut off when you're actually dealing with it. But what I'm gonna do is put a comment after it. So // and I'm gonna put end of main. Now that's easy because when I'm scrolling through these, I know that this particular closing curly brace is the end of my main, right? If I hover over this one, that's the end of my program, end of class program. And this one should be the end of our namespace. Now, of course, you don't have to do this, but it makes it much easier if you do. And if you want to, you can actually put little comments after these. So you could put end of do something and stuff like that as well. Now, the thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new function. So we have to go outside of any other existing function. So I either have to come before or after my do something, but make sure I'm still inside of my same class. So I'm going to come after it. So I'm going to start it with public again, static again. And this time what I'm going to do is, actually, you know what? Let's just return a void again. So remember, void means we're not returning anything. So all we're going to do is we're just going to take in one element of the array, so one video game at a time, and we're just going to output it to the console, okay? And I'm going to put a space. Let's name it. So I'm going to start with capital letter because Pascal casing. So use array element, open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and split those apart. Now, we're going to have to put something different in here. We want to be able to use this array in this method. Now, has anybody gotten to the videos about methods yet? What city do I always compare methods or functions to? Anybody get to those? What city do I compare functions to or methods? It has a particular slogan that's great for it. Did I stump you guys? It is the Sin City of Las Vegas, right? Because Las Vegas, their phrase is, hey, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? So what happens in a function stays inside of a function, okay? So this array is created in our main method. So we say that this video game is scoped to the main method. Now, think about what scope means, right? Where have you heard of scope before, right? How about microscope, right? How about telescope, right? Or how about I guess a rifle scope if you're gun people, right? But what does it mean, right? A scope means sight or who can see it, okay? So video game is scoped to main, so anything inside of your main function can see it, right? But that means that anything inside of a different function cannot see it. So for example, I can't just say console write line instead of I use array element. I can't output video game square bracket of 0, right? Because it doesn't work. First of all, if it doesn't autofill, something is wrong. And if I try to run this, you know what? It's actually going to be an error message. Boop, because it says the name video games does not exist in the current context. Okay, so what does that mean? The name video games does not exist in the current context. That means, hey, I can't see this, and you haven't declared anything else for that one, right? Yeah, good, Alex, you got it, right? So the thing about this one is we can't just use it automatically. Instead, we need to do something new, and we have to use a function argument and a parameter. Okay, so we come back up here. We need a parameter. I can never spell. And argument. So what are those, right? So a parameter and argument is a way to throw something from one function into another function, okay? So down here, I need to be able to catch one element in my array. So what is one element in my array? Well, it's one video game, okay? But what data type is that? What do you guys think? What is the data type of one element of my array? Yeah, now you got it. Right, so it is one string. So down here, I'm going to create a temporary variable called string, and let's just call it game. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these and throw it down here, and it's going to catch in this temporary variable, which we can then use inside of these closing or open and closing curly braces. Okay, so let's go ahead and just output it to this. So let's give it a little bit of context. So I'm going to put a \r\n, and we're going to put, let's output an array element. Let's have one more console write line, just to have a little bit more code inside of here. Set of double quotes. And let's put curly braces 0, remember advanced concatenation, is one of my favorite video games. Favorite video games. And then of course we have to fill that back in by putting a comma, and then we're going to put in that games. Now notice when I typed it out, it was on that list. So that means, hey, I can actually see that. Okay. So now we have our custom function that's going to catch one string and allow us to use that string. We got to go back up to where we need it, right? So remember, we're in our main now. And let's go ahead and create a function call, okay? So function call and using an argument. And an argument is going to be what we're throwing in. That is going to be up here. And this is the parameter that's going to catch it. And this is in the videos. I saw that question in the chat. It's explained really well in the videos because it shows like boxes on either side and a value flying back and forth, and it's kind of a lot more visual, okay? So what is the function call for this function? The function call, don't worry about the argument yet, but what is the function call of this new function we just created? What do you guys think? What is the function call for it? What is the function call for this? Anybody know it? Okay. Yeah, that's close. Close. So Alex said, hey, isn't it just the name of the function, use array element, open closing parentheses and a semicolon, right? And then he skipped ahead and said, can we put video games inside of here? And close. I'm going to show you what happens when we do. All right, video games. Nope, TJ, that's not it either. Now, when I put this in here, right, it says, hey, go use this, right, and send in video games. But when I launch this, look what happens. We have another build error. Let's look at it. It says, cannot convert a string square brackets to a string. And then it tells you the line 35. So this, now this is super programming, right? Cannot convert string array to string. Now, what does that mean in English, right? It says, hey, you told me when you created this function that you're going to give me one string, okay? What is this? This is not one string, it's a whole string array. So let's look at this. Hey, I can't convert a string array to a string, so I'm just not going to do anything because you told me I was getting one and you're giving me lots, right? So what do we have to do after it? Well, we have to set it one individual one, and let's send in the first one, right? So if I want to give it the first element, I need to put square brackets and an index number of 0. That's going to throw that one divinity. Let's see if this runs. There we go. And now it runs, right? And we already explained all of this. So we put down here, let's put an array element, and Divinity2 is one of my favorite video games. Let's take a look, right? So we created a string array. We took one string, this string right here, right? Because that's how you target an array element, the name of the array, specific index number, and it says throw this down here, okay? So what this actually is, it's a text string of Divinity2 spacebar, 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 okay? Is it the same as this? Now that's kind of a tricky question, right? It is definitely different variables, okay? But the value is going to be the same because we're copying this value into this brand new temporary variable. So then we can use it like we were using the other one. So then we'd say, let's output the array element, and then we say, hey, that's one of my favorite games. So that's where we get this part for that. Okay. Now, when we hit to the closing curly brace, and this is important, this temporary variable explodes, right? So just picture the whole thing lighting on fire in a big mushroom cloud because it's no longer available to us because this game variable is only scoped to use array element. Now think about it, scoped to. So game is scoped to use array element. So the only place that I can use this game is down here inside of my curly braces. Yeah, that's where we're getting to, right? So we're doing one first and then we're gonna do that. So now let's go ahead and make it more complicated because that's the fun part, right? So what if I wanted to output all of the array elements? And I'm going to put one at a time. Okay, so the cool part is Alex skipped ahead. Oops. TJ, what is the no for? Do you have a question for me, or is that a question for something else? If you have a question, type it in. Okay, so I'll put all of the array elements one at a time. So if we're going to be cycling through the array, depends upon your theory for that one. What kind of loop should we use? And it's already kind of a mute question because you know what Alex already put it, that we're going to use a for each loop because the for each loop allows us to cycle through an array or a list or a dictionary, and we could just use those array elements. So let's go ahead and create one here. So we're going to say for each, open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and split those apart. And inside of here, we need to create one of the data type. So that's going to be a string. And we can put this one as, let's say, maybe one video game. How about that? In, right? And then in what? In the whole entire array. So that is video games. See the difference? One video game, all the video games. Okay, so that's kind of that. We do have another quick question. Has to be in the main though. No. So we can actually call this function anywhere we want because right now it is public, and so anywhere can see it. So if I wanted to, I could actually put it down here inside of that. And instead of throwing in an array element, I would just have to throw in a text string or something like that. So we can actually do that in a little bit too. So we're going to come back to that. But if it doesn't get answered, you ask me again. All right. So let's do this for each one, right? So we have created our for each loop. We have created our temporary variable video game. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send in our temp variable into our function to output. So how do we do it? Same way as above. Use array element, open closing parentheses, semicolon, and inside of here, we're just going to send in one video game, right? The singular of that. And just for kind of clarity's sake, I'm going to comment this part out just so it doesn't run, so we don't have two of those showing up. All right, let's see what we get. All right, so here we created our array. Here we created our for each loop, and now it's going to cycle through each element inside of our array one at a time, and it's going to send it down to our function, and it's going to output it. So here we say, let's output an array element. Divinity 2 is one of my favorite games. Let's output one of my array elements. Space Engineers is one of my favorite games. And let's continue that for the rest of the array. Give me 1 second. All right. Anybody have any kind of questions for that? So it's taking it from up here, taking one individual array element, which is a string, setting it down here, copying it to this temporary variable, and then outputting it. All right. Everybody good? Any questions? Okay. Let's just go ahead and put a console write line inside of here. And we're just going to put a \r, \n. I'm going to put some dashes in just because I think it's a nice way to separate it. \r, \n. Okay. So what about these spaces, right? They are so annoying because now we have space at the end, space at the beginning, and so on and so on. Okay. So what we're going to do next is we're going to loop through the array, send in each element one at a time to a function, change it, and catch it. So we're going to be permanently changing these, okay? Yeah, TJ, you can actually send in a dictionary the same way as this. So the only thing you would do is you would just change the data type down here. So you'd put dictionary of string, comma, string, or whatever that kind of data type is, because dictionary is one of our data types, okay? So we're going to loop through the array. We're going to send in the element. We're going to change it, and we're going to determine what that's going to be in a minute, right? And then we're going to catch it. Okay, super important here. What kind of loop should we be using for this? Loop through the arrays, change it. Yeah, nicely done. We're going to have to use a for loop because we're going to be changing the elements. Now, for each loop cannot do that, so that is super important. All right, super important. So we're going to be changing those things. All right, so let's start our for loop. Open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, put this apart. We're going to say int I equal to 0, semicolon. I is less than our video games dot length. Remember, that's our array length. And then semicolon I plus plus. So this is just going to cycle through our video games, outputting them one at a time. Just to kind of check that, right? Let's just go ahead and put our video games in here, square brackets, put an I inside of it, just like before, okay? Let's go ahead and run it. All we're going to get, by the way, is a list of our names down here. Okay, so that is working. So let's comment that out. So instead of just outputting them, what we want to do is we want to send the array element into a new function that will change it and return it. Okay, send the array element into a new function, change it, return it. So that's the important thing about this. Okay, let's go down and create another one. Let's come down here, give myself some space. Remember, I'm still inside of my class and I'm after any other function. Let's go ahead and make it public, static, and then I have to stop. So far, we've been returning what? Void, nothing. All right, what data type are we going to be returning now? Alex is ready for it. He's like, already string, boom, you are correct, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to be taking a string array, sending one string in, changing it, and then returning the string back. So that's going to be super important. So the return of it is a string. All right, now we're going to name it. I'm going to call this one change element, making sure it starts with that capital letter, open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and split those apart. Now, we have to bring in a string element, so it's kind of something like this, right? We need a parameter. Can I do string, can I call it game? What do you guys think? Can I have that game? But what about some line number up here, 73? I already have one called game. Alex right off the bat said yes, right? What do you guys think? Could we do it? The answer is yes, so nicely done, right? Because of what? Because of scope, all right? So remember, this game only exists in between here. So if I call this one game, it's said to be scoped to change element. So we can use it inside of here. And after we get done with that function, it explodes. So we don't have to deal with it anymore. Okay, there you go. See, Alex is just quoting me already. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Scope. All right, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna change the string element. I'm gonna change it in a couple different ways. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna use some of the new stuff that's inside of our string methods and properties. So we're gonna jump down to here, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trim it and capitalize it. All right, now we have used the capitalizing a little bit before, right? What do we use that for? Where have we used the capitalizing? Because I showed it to you before string methods. Yeah, nice. We used it in validation. So we'd only have to check one different text case instead of multiple cases, because that would just be annoying, right? Now, the important thing about the changing the things is that the string methods are temporary. So what does that mean, right? So we must save them is the important part. Okay, a lot of people forget this. Okay, now what we're gonna do is we are gonna trim it and then capitalize it. Yeah, nice, good. Alex says he remembers that from the cookbooking problem. Exactly. Okay, so what we're gonna do is if I just wanted to trim something, then that's the trim command. And what the trim does is it takes away any spaces at the start or spaces at the end of a text string. So let's come back up here for a minute. So they're called leading and trailing spaces. So basically what it does is it starts at the very beginning of a text string and says, hey, are you a space? And it says, no, I'm a D. And it says, okay, you can stay. And then it comes to the far right-hand side, the very last character, and it says, are you a space? And it goes, yeah, I'm a space. It says, you're skipped. And so it goes to the left. Are you a space? It goes, yeah, I'm a space. You're skipped. Space, skipped, space, skipped, space, skipped. It says, are you a space? And it goes, no, I'm a 2. And it says, okay, you can stay. And then it returns just this part of it. But also, it will leave the spaces in between the other characters. Okay, so inside of here, it'll skip all of these spaces and just start with the space engineers. And then it won't cut off anything at the other side. Okay, so that's what the trim is going to do. Now, the way we activate it is we give it the string name, variable name. So that's going to be game. Remember, that's the one we're creating here, dot trim, okay, capital trim, open closing parentheses and a semicolon. Now, this is kind of fun. What is this? Okay, that is the method that we're using. But what does trim open closing parentheses look like? Let me scroll up. Does it look kind of like this? Yeah, right? Does it look like this? The name of it and an open closing parentheses? Yeah, right? So what this is the dot trim is a function call to the method that lives inside of the string of game. So that's kind of how we start going more in depth about string objects, because we're going inside of the string and actually calling it something that already exists. Now, super important, trim is temporary. So is this saved? No, right? This is not saved. So what I have to do is I have to use an assignment operator, right? When an assignment operator is just the name of it and the assignment operator equals. So now it says, hey, trim that string and save it back to itself. Okay. How about capitalizing it? Well, that would be game dot to upper, open closing parentheses and a semicolon. But remember, temporary, so we have to save it by saying game equals that. So after you trim it, capitalize it and save it back to myself. Now, this is the important thing here, is after we change it, change the variable, we have to return the changed string. Now, this is new, right? And if you say you're going to return something, you have to return something. So for example, if I try to run this now, it's going to give me a build error, and it says, not all code paths return a value, which is, again, programming speak. But what does that actually mean, right? Not all code paths return a value. And what line is it? 81, here, okay? Now, what this means is it says, hey, you created this function, and you told me that I am returning a string, and you are not doing that, okay? So you have code that doesn't return this value of a string that you said I was, so I'm not gonna run, okay? TJ, what do you mean, does order matter? Order of what? TJ wants to know if the order, could I put to upper first or to trim? In this case, that's fine because it wouldn't matter either way. But you have to kind of think of it logically speaking, right? All right, so we have to make sure that we return this path. Now, you're gonna see this quite a lot if you leave off the return value, or, this is a big or, if you put a return inside of a conditional, like you say, if something is true, return. But then it's possible that that conditional won't run. And so there might be a chance of never having a return value, okay? So that's what it's trying to prevent. So in order to return something, let's go ahead and fix that error. We're gonna use the return keyword. So lowercase return. And what am I sending back? Well, the changed string, which is what? Game. And then a semicolon. All right. So now that should fix that error. And just to kind of prove it, let's do that. It won't actually show it yet because we haven't what? We didn't function call it. But I just wanted to show you that at least it ran, so it cleared that error from it. Okay, so now we have our cool new function that's going to change stuff. Let's scroll back up. We have our for loop that's going to cycle through the array, so we are ready to start utilizing it. And everybody with me so far before I do this next step? Everybody good? All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to send in each one at a time into this new function. So I need a function call, change element, open closing parentheses and a semicolon. What am I sending in? Well, I'm sending her in one array element. So I need the array name, square brackets with an I, because remember we're using a for loop that starts at 0. All right, so that's sending in. Am I good? Do I need to do anything else? This is tricky. Let's run it. And it says boopity boopity boop. All right, we're done. Hey, wait a minute, where is it, right? Because we did 46 console right line these dashes, which is right here. Is this running? What do you guys think? Yes or no? Is the for loop running? Is this happening? Yeah, right? Alex got it. He said it's good, but you need a right line because after it changed it, we're not right lining inside of here, so nothing is going to appear on the console. All right, let me do this. How about after our for loop, a for loop, what we're going to do is we're going to see if the elements changed. I'll put array elements just to be specific. Have changed. Okay, so for that, I just want to use a for each loop, open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and split those apart. Inside of here, we're going to do another string. We're going to do game. Let's do video game to keep it. Let's go back to game. Can I have game? Can I have game here, here, and here? The good news is yes, right? Because that's going to be scoped to our for each loop. So then we can use it in video games. Then let's just go ahead and write it out, console write line, and let's just do game. All right, am I set? What do you guys think? Can I run it? Remember, I'm tricky. All right, let's see it. All right, we have Divinity 2. We have Space Engineers, right? Valorant and Fall Guys. Is that correct? No, right? It didn't change anything. What are we missing here? All right, what we're missing here is we're missing the returned value of this, right? Because what we're doing is we're sending in this video game square bracket of I, we're changing it down here, then we're returning the string here. But are we ever changing the array? No, right? We're not doing anything yet because we're sending it from here. We're using a copy of it down here. So we're missing the catch of it, okay? So we need to catch the returned value. Yeah, we basically have to save it. Good, right? So how do I do that? What do I save it to? Well, what are we changing? Well, I'm changing this video game square bracket of I. So same way that we did it down here, right? We need to use the assignment operator equal sign. So I'm going to say video games square bracket of I equals change element video games square bracket of I, right? So send in the original name, trim it, capitalize it, and then save it back to itself. Okay, let's run it. And now look, everything is uppercase. All of the weird spaces are gone. And now it looks great. And it will permanently stay this way anywhere in your code after it runs. So anywhere else after line number 61 will have those permanent trimmed and capitalized video games. Okay? Everybody good? Any questions here? Any questions? Cool. All right. Now, it's already 9 o'clock, so I'm going to let you guys decide. Do you want to use or create a simple menu system still, or would you like to end it for tonight? What do you guys think? It was a 1 or 2, because yes. Do you want to do a menu, or would you like to end it? So put menu or end. How about that? Okay, menus are the winners. So let's go ahead and create a simple menu. So let's just put it here. I'm going to put this back inside of my main. Okay, so making sure I'm inside of my main, and after all that rest of that stuff, I'm just going to go ahead and make another console write line, set of double quotes, \r, \n, n, some dashes, \r, \n, just to kind of give us a nice little visual break. Now, let's create a simple menu. Now, the idea of this is that we're going to create a menu that's going to consistently ask the user what they want to do until they say, let's end this. So we're going to give them an option to end the program. Now, in order to do that, what do we have to create, right? What kind of loop runs as long as the user wants it to? Nice. Without hesitation, it is a while loop. Nicely done, right? Because how many times does a while loop go? I don't know. As long as it needs to, right? While the user still wants it to run, it will go, right? The answer is not 4 3 times. I don't know. What if the user wants to go 4 or 5 or 6, right? Because it's up to the user. So what we need is we need a while loop open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and split those apart. Now, what are we going to test against? Well, we have to be able to give the user the choice to go again, right? So in order to do that, I need a variable that they can test against. So I'm going to create a string variable to test against. Now I'm going to call it string, or the data type is string. I'm going to call it go again. I'm going to say it's going to be equal to a text string of yes, and then a semicolon. Inside of here, I'm going to say, as long as this text string is yes, continue to loop. All right, so go again. Now, to ensure that the case doesn't matter, I'm going to say to lower, open closing parentheses, equal text string of yes. So, okay, let me put that one more time. Boop, there we go. While this string is the same as yes, run this loop. Okay, yep, TJ totally got it, to lower. Now, it starts off as yes, so it's gonna force it to automatically at least run one time. Right now, if we try to run this, this will make an infinite loop, and it will loop forever because nothing is changing go again yet. It's always gonna be yes. So in our loop, we have to remember to change this so it's not an infinite loop, okay? All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is tell the user what's going on and give the choices. All right, so anytime we're talking to the user, it's console write line, set of double quotes, \, and n, and we're gonna say choose an option by its number, \, and n. And now we're just gonna give them the options, right? So again, it's gonna be a console.writeLine, open closing, semicolon, set of double quotes, and I'm gonna put something like 1 in slash or a parentheses, option 1. Let's go ahead and do it again. We'll put 2, option 2. And finally, the third one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow them to exit. So I'm going to say exit program. Okay. Now, after we ask the user for something, what's the next step? We prompt the user, we give them their choices. The next thing we do is catch the response. So we're going to say string, yeah, user choice equals a console.readLine, open closing, and a semicolon. What comes after that? This is always tricky. It shouldn't be tricky, it's validate. All right, but what kind of validation do I use here? Now this is one that is a little tricky. It is a while loop, of course. Is it an open-ended question? No, right? Is it a specific question? Yes, right? What are the options? 1, 2, or 3? Now, am I going to be doing math with these? What do you guys think? Am I going to be doing math with a 1 or a 2 or a 3? Yeah, no, right? So really, I don't have to use try parse. What I have to use is a specific answer validation, which is our not equal to. And the great part is that we can just leave them as strings. We don't have to do a number or an integer of 1. We can just do a text string of 1, which makes it much easier for us. Yeah, Alex got it right off the bat, too. All right, so we're going to say user choice not equal to a text string of 1. Then we're going to have our and user choice not equal to a text string of 2. And user choice not equal to a text string of 3. Now, if this seems a little bit confusing, you might want to go back and watch the validation for specific answers, and that's going to be way back in the week number 1, okay? So we do 1, 2, or 3. That is our only choices. So the first thing, part of validation, is we say, hey, what's the error, right? So only choose, 2 O's, an option from the menu. Restate the question. So that's going to be a which option do you want to to run 1, 2, or 3, question mark, and then recatch the answer using the same variable of user choice, equals a console.readLine, open, closing, and a semicolon. No, that's actually good though. One of the students made a accidental menu in the program for CE07. That's okay. All right, so we give them the choices. Now what do we do with the choice, right? What do we do with the choice? All right, so what we have to do is we have to deal with the different choices. So we need a conditional. Remember, if the user chooses 1, do this. If the user chooses 2, do that. If the user chooses 3, do that. Okay, so we're going to have an if, open, closing parentheses, open, closing curly braces, split that apart. What are we looking for? If the user choice is 1. Okay, user choice is the same as a text string of 1. So if that's true, they want to run option 1. For now, we're just going to kind of quickly do a console write line, and we're just going to say something like option 1 will run. For now, we're going to come back and we're going to add some more stuff to this. Then what we're going to do is we're going to use an else if. Now it's important to use an else if because it's still part of this same question, 1 or 2 or 3. So don't use separate if statements, if 1, if 2, if 3, because it's still one part of, it's part of all one conditional block. So that's where we'd use those else ifs. All right, so always do another test. So let's do another user choice is the same as a text string of 2. Come down, let's put a console write line inside of here, and we're gonna put option 2 will run. At the bottom, after our closing curly brace, an else if, open, closing parentheses, open, closing curly brace, split that apart. Inside of here, user choice equal text string of 3. So we have all of our different options up here and all of our different matching conditionals. Now, this one's going to be slightly different, right? Because we're not running an option 1, we're not running an option 2, we're going exit. Okay, so let's make this slightly different. So we're going to say text string of exiting the program. And then this is the important thing. What is causing the loop to go again and again and again? That's the go again variable, always being a text string of yes. So it's going to be important that we change the value of the variable, keeping the loop going. All right, so go again equal to permanently changing it to a text string of no. All right. So this says as soon, hey, if you type in 1, I'm going to do that. 2, I'm going to do that. 3, I'm going to end our while loop. Now let's just make sure that this runs before doing anything more complicated. Okay. So we buzz through the first part of it. Yep. And then here is our stuff. And then here is our console write line with our dashes. And then this starts our simple menu. Okay. So choose an option by its number. Well, how about if we type in 4? Oh, not 1, because our validation, which is right here, catches it and says only 1, 2, or 3 is valid choices. So what if I type in 2? Option 2 will run. Okay, so it says running this conditional. When it comes down to that closing curly brace, it says, hey, is go again still yes? Nothing's changed it. So then it outputs the menu again and allows the user to choose another option. So how about 1? Option 1 will run. How about 1 again? Option 1 will run. How about 2? Option 2 will run. And you can continue doing this for as long as the user wants to play with it. When they're done, that's when they're going to type in 3. Notice it says exiting the program, which is what we told it to say. We change that value of go again to no, which makes this false, which stops our never-ending while loop. And that will end your program. Everybody with me so far on how the basics of a menu works? Any questions? Everybody good? I don't see any questions. Right. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make this a little bit more complicated. So when you're creating a menu system, the idea is to make the main as small as possible. So what you want to do is you want to create a function that takes control of what happens if they hit 1, and a function that will control what happens if they hit 2, and a function that will control what happens if they type. Actually, you don't need one for 3 because 3 is exit. Don't worry for that one. So what we're going to do is we're going to create 2 more functions. Nice. All right. So let's create 2 more functions. Public, static. Now, because these aren't going to be returning anything, they're going to return void, nothing, right? I'm going to call this one option 1. Open closing parentheses, open closing curly braces, and split this apart. Now, for these, I don't want them to take anything in, so I'm going to have no parameter here. Okay, so that does be able to skip. So inside of here, oops, I don't know what I put there. Let me delete that again. Let me try that one more time. A console array line, text string, and then put I am inside of the option 1 method. Okay. That's all I'm going to put for there. I'm going to come back and add more to it again. I'm going to create one for the next one. So public, static, void. Making sure there's spaces. I'm going to call this one option 2, open closing curlies, and split those apart. We'll just put something in here called like I am inside. I spelled that one wrong. Give me 1 second. Of the option 2 method. I'll take that one out and I'll go fix the of because that's going to drive me nuts because I put faux of. There we go. All right. Now, just because I created these, are they going to run? No, because I need a function call. So I'm going to come back up here inside of my menu that I created, inside of my conditionals, and say, hey, when the user chooses 1, then let's go ahead and function call option 1 method. So that's going to be option 1, open closing, semicolon. Same for option 2. Option 2, open closing, semicolon. All right. Let's run it, see what we got. Here is our method, or here's a menu, I mean. Let's see what happens when I press 1. All right, option 1 will run. Remember, that comes from right here inside of our conditional. We come down to that function call, and it says skip all the way down to this line, because that's our function, and it should output I'm inside of our option 1 method. And then come right back to our menu at the top and says, all right, pick another one, which is down here. How about if I hit 2? We get option 2 will run, I'm inside of option 2 method. And we can do this as many times as we want. All right, until we press 3, and 3 will end the program. Okay, now what else can we do inside of here? Well, in your homework, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to start calling other methods. So could I put something like this? How about a function call to another method? Could I do that? Yeah, right? We totally could. Alex, that's totally what it was, by the way. Okay, so we're gonna have a function call. So I'm gonna say, hey, I'm just gonna put do something. All right, so let's put do something. Hey, the good news, it showed up on our shortcuts one, open, closing, and a semicolon. Notice it turned blue, so that's great. So let's run it. When I hit 1, what do we get? Option 1 will run. Where's that from? Right here, right? In our conditional inside of our menu. Let's go down. Notice then, I'm inside of option 1 method. So that comes from line number 134 inside of our option 1 method. Then we says, hey, jump down to do something. Where's that? Oh, here it is. So then it puts, boom, this can be any code. All right, then it ends. So this one ends, which jumps us back up to where it was called, right there. Then it says, there's nothing over here. So option 1 will jump us all the way back up to here. which ends our conditional, which comes down to that closing curly brace, which says, hey, did anyone change this go again variable? Nope. So that's why our menu will consistently go again. All right. Anybody have any kind of questions about this? Now, once you get the basics of this, it's super easy to start building it up and up. You can make it more and more complex. But think about it this way. Is it all stuff that we've been doing for the last 2 different classes? Yeah, ITD1 taught you what a string was, right? They actually taught you what while loops were and stuff like that, right? But now we're just putting them all together to make something more complex. So think of Legos, right? Lego is a simple block. You put blocks together and you get something super cool, like a Hogwarts castle or something like that, right? Does it all based on a simple building block? Yeah, of course. All right. Any questions on anything that we talked about today, or anything that you guys have questions in general? Any questions? Perfect. That is good. All right. Well, if you guys are watching this later and you guys have questions, remember to jump on a Slack and ask away in our ITD2 channel. Thanks for watching, everybody, and happy coding.